I never feel at home in this house or this skin." These words echo the profound discomfort Franz Kafka felt in his own life, a discomfort he brilliantly transposed into his literature. As we delve into Kafka's life and work, we'll discover a writer who gave voice to the anxieties and absurdities that lurk beneath the surface of our so-called rational world. The world of Franz Kafka is a twisted, unsettling place where normal life takes sharp, unexpected turns. Everyday tasks become nightmares, and the search for answers only leads to more questions. Beyond the bizarre and haunting nature of his stories, Kafka deeply explored the human struggle against the pressures of society, family relationships, and personal inner conflicts. Prepare to enter a realm where nothing is as it seems, and the only constant is an overwhelming sense of uncertainty. Franz Kafka was born in Prague in 1883. He had a passive and withdrawn mother and an extremely despotic father. Although Kafka's father came from a working-class background, he rose to become a successful businessman through his entrepreneurial spirit. Interestingly, Kafka did not at all resemble his imposing father. While his father was quite large and physically strong, Kafka himself was born weak and frail. His father, recognizing that Kafka was physically weaker, also noted that his son's personality was more naive and gentle, unlike his own hard and sociable nature. This discrepancy led Kafka's father to subject him to psychological pressure, including repeated sarcasm and contempt. As a result, Kafka struggled deeply with feelings of inferiority, self-hatred, and guilt during his youth. Amid these challenges, Kafka discovered his passion for writing and aspired to become a writer. However, his father disapproved of his literary pursuits and instead sent him to law school. Although Kafka was not very enthusiastic about studying at the Faculty of Law, it was there that he met Max Brod, who would later become his best friend. Brod describes Kafka as shy and reserved, speaking rarely but often profoundly when he did. After university, Kafka reluctantly took a job at an insurance company. There, he struggled with the intense workload and low salary. Despite these challenges, he continued to write, though he initially did not consider his writings worthy of publication. Only later, under the urging of Brod, he decided to publish his works. Unfortunately, these early publications were not successful. This lack of success deepened the insecurity Kafka already felt, driven largely by the traumas inflicted by his father during his youth. This problematic relationship with his father haunted Kafka throughout his life, influencing his self-perception and his writings. At the age of 36, Kafka wrote a detailed 47-page letter to his father, describing the traumas he had caused and offering him a chance to understand his son's pain. "Dearest father," went the letter, "you asked me recently why I maintain that I'm so afraid of you. As usual, I was unable to think of any answer to your question, partly for the very reason that I am afraid of you, and partly because an explanation of the grounds for this fear would mean going into far more details than I could ever keep in mind while talking. What I would have needed was a little encouragement, a little friendliness, but I wasn't fit for that. What was always incomprehensible to me was your total lack of feeling for the suffering and shame you could inflict on me with your words and judgments. It was as though you had no notion of your power." Kafka described how his father's physical presence alone made him feel small and inadequate. "I was weighed down by your mere physical presence," he wrote simply. "I remember, for instance, how often we undressed in the same bathing hut. There was I, skinny, weak, slight. You, strong, tall, broad. I felt a miserable specimen. When we stepped out, you holding me by my hand, a little skeleton, unsteady, frightened of the water, incapable of copying your swimming strokes. I was frantic with desperation." For Kafka, even his beloved writing was an effort to process the hurt his father inflicted. "My writing was all about you. All I did there, after all, was to bemoan what I could not bemoan upon your breast," he confessed in the letter, laying bare how his literary passion stemmed from an inability to openly express his pain to his father. However, Kafka never handed the letter directly to his father. Instead, he gave it to his mother to deliver, but she too, fearing her husband's reaction, never passed it on. Thus, Kafka's heartfelt words never reached his father. He never considered publishing his later writings, fearing they might also fail. Kafka even instructed his friend Max Brod on his deathbed to burn all his unpublished works. Of course, Max Brod recognized Kafka's literary potential. After Kafka's death, he meticulously organized these works and published them under Kafka's name. Thanks to this friend, who perhaps believed in Kafka's potential more than Kafka himself, Franz Kafka posthumously became one of the most influential literary figures of the 20th century. The themes of Franz Kafka's existential pain, absurdity, and the mind's resistance that permeated his fiction greatly influenced writers and philosophers grappling with the same questions after him. Central to his philosophy was the idea that human existence is filled with pain, absurdity, and an endless struggle to maintain one's sanity. Kafka portrayed characters struggling with bureaucratic nightmares, feelings of isolation, and the apparent meaninglessness of life. His stories expressed the deep anxiety of modern life in a way that anticipated the existentialist and absurdist movements. Thinkers like Jean-Paul Sartre recognized Kafka as an influential existentialist voice, while Albert Camus identified strong absurdist elements in Kafka's surreal narratives. Where Kafka especially aligned with the absurdists was in his depictions of the fundamental incoherence and lack of logic governing the world. The rules and systems his characters lived under made absolutely no sense, trapping them in hopeless, baffling situations. Camus cited Kafka's writings as powerful examples of the absurd human condition. Though not a philosopher himself, Kafka gave imaginative expression to many of the era's most pressing existential questions through his surreal symbolic tales. The way Kafka powerfully depicted feelings of pain, loneliness, and a lack of reason or logic in his works surprisingly foreshadowed the philosophical issues that would greatly concern thinkers who came after him. In this way, Kafka's despairing vision profoundly shaped the intellectual evolution of existentialism and absurdism. This existential alienation and sense of being trapped in an absurd, incomprehensible system is vividly embodied in Kafka's famous novel, The Trial, which tells the story of someone victimized by the irrational justice system. The main character, Joseph K., is suddenly arrested one day without being told the reason. He is then summoned to court, but isn't informed about the location or the specific courtroom. Caught in an absurd situation, Joseph K. struggles to understand the crime he is accused of, while grappling with the irrationality of the justice system. Even by the story's end, Joseph cannot determine the crime for which he is being tried and remains labeled a criminal. Although the events in this book may seem absurd and illogical, similar events do occur in reality. Moreover, Joseph's sense of unexplained guilt reflects Kafka's own feelings of guilt, stemming from his father's contempt during his childhood. While the authority Joseph confronts in The Trial is the justice system, for Kafka, it was his father. Both faced accusations from authority without understanding why they were considered guilty. The story in Kafka's The Metamorphosis is even more surreal than The Trial. The main character, Gregor Samsa, wakes up one morning to find himself transformed into an insect. In this state, he cannot even leave his bed, yet his first thoughts are about how he will manage to go to work and explain his condition to his boss. When his family with whom he lives discovers that their son has turned into an insect, they initially try to help him, but soon they begin to fear him. However, it is likely that even Samsa's transformation into an insect would not significantly change his life. Samsa already feels like an insect, alienated and insignificant. Overwhelmed by his grueling job, unsympathetic boss, and the burdens placed upon him, he has become less than human. In fact, his first concern upon transforming is not why he has become an insect or how he might return to his original form, but rather how he will get to work. This preoccupation with work over his extraordinary predicament underscores his profound detachment from life. The Metamorphosis is a story about a man alienated from his family, his job, and his environment, ultimately becoming detached from life itself due to the absurdity he endures. Kafka focuses on the powerless individual in conflict with society, typically represented by authority figures, the powerful, and the mighty. In these two books and other works by Kafka, the main characters consistently face situations that are profoundly absurd and beyond their control. Despite being victims of the nonsensical circumstances they encounter, these characters persist in their struggles. Joseph fights against the corrupt justice system to the very end. Even after transforming into an insect, Samsa continues to cling to life. In the end, neither character achieves their desires. Joseph is declared guilty, and Samsa remains an insect. However, the resilience of these characters in the face of such bleak and absurd conditions is a poignant aspect that adds depth to these stories. Tragically, Franz Kafka himself never lived to see the profound impact and acclaim his haunting works would achieve. He died from tuberculosis in 1924 at the age of 40, his literary genius largely unrecognized during his lifetime. Yet Kafka's story contains an insightful lesson about the perils of self-doubt and insecurity. How many others throughout history have similarly failed to realize their creative potential or tragically discounted their own talents due to crippling self-doubts? Kafka's legacy cautions us to have faith in ourselves and our abilities, for the world is undoubtedly littered with masterpieces never written, inventions never built, discoveries never made, all because someone could not see the value burning within themselves that others so clearly perceived. Thank you for watching.